Welcome back to another episode of System of Systems, the How Do You Misinformation arm of the Safety Propaganda Counterintelligence Network. Is your host, Adam.
Matthew.
And we have a special guest with us here tonight. He's a multimedia artist, a sculptor, and the founding member of pioneering, long-lived, well-known experimental group Black Dice. Bjorn Copeland, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Before we get started, I'm one of my good friends in New York is Zach Davis. Apparently he was hanging out with your brother the other night.
Oh, really? I'm
Yeah.
jealous. I haven't seen Eric forever. Miss him.
Yeah, Zach said because he asked me if you were in LA, because he said he was like, because I was with Eric the other night and he's, he thought he would have seen you. So then he assumed you must have been in Los Angeles.
It's true. It's been a minute since I've been back in New York. I think we played a show at Knockdown Center.
With
I don't know how long
ago.
Yeah, it was a minute ago. But yeah, I would love to get back. Eric has a birthday coming up, but in May. Fortunately, I'm not going to be able to get out there for that, as my girlfriend and I are expecting our first kid. A few weeks from then.
Congratulations. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you very much. Yes. New band member in the works. So
yeah, my wife and I are talking about doing that whole thing right now, actually.
I'm thrilled and equally terrified, but
yeah, I think that's the proper feeling.
I think so. Everyone keeps reassuring me of that. So
yeah,
I'm going to roll with it.
We had a pregnancy scare this week, actually. Turned
Shit.
out to just be like a hormonal thing, but part of me was like, wow, I'm gonna be a dad, and then the other half of me is like,
oh fuck, I'm gonna be a dad.
yeah.
Well, I wish you luck on that journey,
dude. You know what I wanted to like? What we're talking about, Eric, the fact that you guys are brothers and have been in a band together for so long and have avoided like the Liam Noel Gallagher thing is kind of I mean, I have a little brother and I love my brother, but like, we get in fist fights like all the time to this day, even if we're together for just like a little bit of time. How have you guys managed to stay so rock solid within the tensions of a band?
I think we just really lucked out. I mean, everybody that has been in Black Dice and is currently in Black Dice I love to death. And I don't know, sometimes I didn't realize like how lucky I was, but we're 2 years apart. Certainly got in. Eric started playing music before I did, and then kind of encouraged me to start, and then really started Black Dice like within a couple months of learning how to play the guitar. In air quotes, I would say. But yeah, I don't know, we get along really well, and I think also just considering like what we make, there was never like any pressure of, I don't know, it never seemed like it was a career or anything. It was just fun to do, and we were lucky that we were able to support ourselves for a long time off of doing it. And yeah, the fact that we still love hanging out, still love playing music together is just a huge win, so.
Yeah. Like when I look back, because when early 2000s, I started college in 2006, but I knew who you guys were when Beaches and Canyons came out.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that record, but I remember like in retrospect, I remember just being like, it was a weird sort of media push for that New York era where you guys were getting lumped in with like the yeah yeahs and there was the documentary that came out.
Yeah, and I have not seen that yet. I don't think it's too close time wise and too close to home.
Yeah. because like looking back on it, you're like, wow, these bands, like none of these bands have anything to do with each other. Like
Yeah.
out of all of them included, it's definitely Black Dice and I guess maybe Liars that ended up doing something kind of interesting. But what was that like to be kind of, because it was in a weird transitional moment in the industry where like the labels were still in denial about what was coming, so there was still these sort of like marketing pushes for the next cool thing. What was that
Yeah.
like?
I mean, it was strange. I mean, just living in Williamsburg, or I guess I always lived in Greenpoint, but close enough to Williamsburg. But you couldn't really even walk down Bedford Avenue without getting stopped for a street scene or, street fashion thing. Or, I mean, it seemed like every magazine was flocked around there. And in order to make a story cohesive, they just sort of covered everybody. For us also, it was weird because like DFA was just starting, and since we were starting to put records out on that, we were getting attention through that. And then at the same time, like, I mean, we always kind of got a lot of attention just because of who we were friends with. Really, I
Yeah.
mean, first it was like, oh, they could write that it had some tie to LCD Sound System, although that wasn't a band yet at the time. And then Animal Collective and Lightning Bolt, like, those were all bands that were certainly became a lot more popular than we were. Um, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, it was really bizarre. It certainly wasn't anything we were expecting. And there's some really great stuff that happened. I mean, we were able to play like a lot of different types of shows that wouldn't have been available to us, and going over to Europe and doing festivals and things like that. But it also, I think, confused a lot of people because we didn't make, I mean, to us, it just seemed like normal music, but it did not go down that way for a lot of people. I mean, I think a lot of folks just thought of it as just noise, which was fine. But to us, I mean, we always thought we were making like rock
Yeah.
music,
I've
basically.
heard you use the term deconstructed rock before.
Yeah, I mean, if you have to like use press release speak, that's like kind of how I would describe it. And I think it still is. It's just, but yeah, I don't know. We lucked out. We've lucked out a million times, but getting some attention and being able to play bigger venues and other than just like DIY spots and festivals and things like that, all kind of came about because of like that attention that was focused on New York at that time. Um, and there was like ties to some of those other bands that you mentioned. I mean, like we shared a practice space with Liars and Brian from Yeah Yeah Yeahs for a little while, um, and Yeah Yeah Yeahs were all people that were around Secret Project Robot, which was sort of our home away from home for a long, long time. So there were ties, but if you were outside of New York, it probably was a real head scratcher.
Yeah. I grew up in Cape Cod, so I was like close
Oh wow.
enough to, yeah, yeah, yeah. So I was pretty close to Providence, but too young to enjoy the Port Thunder scene
Yeah.
in person. But um
Well, that was the first time we lucked out, was just being in Providence at that moment.
yeah.
There was just like a lot of bands that really were super high energy and doing something at least way different than what I'd ever been exposed to. So yeah, I mean, I feel like we lucked out being there at that moment in time, and then certainly lucked out being in New York at that, the following decade and a half.
Yeah, I mean, Fort Thunder's been like pretty well historicized in its aftermath. But back then, you guys obviously were playing a much different style of music. I have the early EPs, like, the crazy noisecore kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Did you find was there like a competitive spirit at Fort Thunder, do you think, where because you had like
100%.
lightning, yeah.
100%. I mean,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
the difference is that like Landed and Lightning Bolt and Olneyville Sound System and Six Finger Satellite and Hydrogen Terrors and all these bands could actually fucking play. And I really was just figuring out how to do it. So a lot of the we kind of slid into being a noisier and noisier and more deconstructed band just because to some extent I didn't know how to play. Everybody else in the band had been in other bands with the exception of me. So, but yeah, I felt like there was a healthy competitive spirit to all of it. But again, like those bands could fucking play like really well.
Yeah, I've seen Lightning Bolt a bunch. It was actually the last band I saw before COVID ruined the entire world. Yeah. Well, I saw them in they did a show in Red Hook. With USA as a Monster and a couple other bands, I think. But do you think were you like already into really loud, chaotic music? Because I know like you could compare it to like I think of something like the Germs, where everybody thinks of the Germs now as this like sort of avant-garde, accidentally avant-garde band, but in reality they just played so fucking badly that it's like chaotic and interesting.
Yeah.
But were you already aware of noisy kind of shit, Japan noise or whatever?
Not
Power
really. I mean,
electronics.
no, not really. I mean, I grew up mostly listening to, I mean, like Spaceman 3 and the
It's one of my
Feelies
favorite
and
bands ever.
yeah, I'm a big fan as well, and Pete's a good friend.
Oh shit.
But yeah, I felt like most of the stuff that I grew up listening to was more sort of like Velvet Underground derived stuff. I didn't really know that at the time. I mean, I knew who Sonic Youth, I had Sonic Youth records and shit like that, but the only way that I found out about a lot of music growing up in Maine was just through the college station that was right up the street from us. And so that tended to be more stuff like Galaxy 500 and Dinosaur Jr. and Sebado and My Bloody Valentine. And but I did not know about a lot of, I mean, I knew who Boredoms were, but it wasn't really till I got to Providence and started going to shows that got exposed to a lot of that music. And it's as simple as something like Galaxy 500 seems, you know what I mean? Where it's just like 3 chords and it's kind of just trucks along. I wouldn't have been able to write those. I couldn't write songs like that still. So we were just lucky that we were able to, I don't know, find kind of a niche or whatever for us to slide into. And but certainly learned a lot from all those bands that I just sort of listed. Learned a ton, actually.
Do you think I just have a question, like when you guys come up with tunes back then, were you thinking like on a macro conceptually about what you were doing? Or and like also how did the tunes like come about? Would you guys like, because if you couldn't really play, would you jam to figure out ideas, or
I
how
couldn't
would you
even play well enough to jam. I mean, it was basically what the early stuff, the way it would start is I would make up a guitar part that was, something I could fuck around with at home.
Yeah.
And then I would bring it in and then everybody else would make it sound cohesive. And so it was really just trying to, I don't know, make something that felt high energy, but yeah, it wasn't, we didn't really start jamming on things until later, I guess.
And how did the like the technology factor play into the process? Because I'm sure some of that was like it may be an extension. If I couldn't play traditionally, I can manipulate like the noise or feedback or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think the thing that was weird is the only types of shows we could get were like hardcore, like underground hardcore shows, and that was not like, I mean, I'd like a lot of old hardcore. We certainly played with some great bands like Drop Dead and Los Crudos and bands like that, but did not feel like any real affinity to that scene overall.
Yeah.
But because those were the only places that you could play, I felt like it took us a little while to feel confident enough to like really start fucking around with different types of sounds. And never really been like a band that was very techy in some ways. It would just sort of be like you would find or inherit some pedal that did maybe just one thing, and then you would exploit the hell out of that. Beaches and Canyons, I guess I bought like a chaos pad, I guess, and that seemed like really techy, almost like in a way that I was uncomfortable with at first, and then
Yeah.
I think that only lasted like 2 records using
Did,
that shit.
didn't you guys have like a custom device built for you by Gavin Russum or?
Yes, now Raina Rusum.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, that would have been around 2004 or something. They built me this box that has like a bunch of filters and a step sequencer in it, and I basically just sat down and told them I want something that'll do this, 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 and this. They spent forever building it, charged nothing basically. Actually, James Murphy at the time, Raina had a little like workshop over at the DFA studios, and apparently James tried to swoop in and nick, like steal my box at one point. So I'm grateful that did not happen, but I mean, to this day, I don't know shit about synthesizers, or I can't stand reading manuals for things. So it's
Yeah. You just have artist intuition.
yeah. I mean, even if you don't know how something works, as long as you know what you like, you can figure out a way to use it.
Yeah. Make your own version of the IKEA furniture.
Exactly.
But yeah, even like back in those early days, though, I would say, like, if you guys were on a bill with like a bunch of power violence bands or whatever, I would think it would still be kind of noticeable that there was like a extra layer of head fuckiness to Black Dice, because those
Yeah.
other bands are going to be like so scene bound or so like
Yes.
elite. They have allegiance to their genre, whereas Black
Yeah.
Dice, you can tell, is like looking outwards.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad it came across that way. I mean, we never really fit in with hardcore, except for the fact that it was really high energy, and at the time it was pretty violent. Like people got hurt a lot at the shows, and but yeah, it could be, I don't know. There were certainly a lot of hardcore shows that we showed up at and got vibed hard or made fun of because we looked more like the Bad News Bears than a hardcore band. And but again, that's where we could get shows. So and we were also just like way sloppier than a lot of those bands. I mean, ultimately what became uninteresting about hardcore was you just realized there was a lot of rules to it, or at least to us it seemed like there was a lot of rules, and like there was this sort of pressure for things to be political in some respect. My brother pulled this move. I was talking to Sam McFeeters from Men's Recovery Project and Born Against fame, who did so I was talking with him the other day, and we were talking about hardcore shows, and I remember one time we played this gig in Cleveland, and the band that played before us were like hardcore Cleveland hardcore legends, and they were just saying all the stupid shit between the songs. My brother just dictaphoned, recorded all of it, and then when we went up, he just played all of their stage banter back just through the microphone. So it was, I don't know, there was some fuckery always involved in what we did. I think we liked taking the piss a little bit, and certainly were probably shit-faced for every gig. So I don't know, maybe that gave us a little bit of courage in some respects.
Yeah. I actually just read this interview while researching for this with Jim Drain. I wasn't feeling
Oh yeah.
But he was apparently he's an academic now, and he was talking about Fort Thunder, and he was complaining that in hindsight it didn't take enough of a political stand, and that he lamented that there weren't enough quote black and brown people at the show, which
I mean, you
seems
could
like
just say that wasn't I mean,
it's like not the demographic.
yeah, I mean, that just wasn't. We're lucky there was even women at the shows.
Dude, that is so true. All right. I was just in Osaka, for that Hospital Productions Festival.
Uh-huh.
And my wife hates industrial music. So she was like, but she was like, being a trooper about it. But then Genocide Organ played,
Uh-huh.
and she really, really like they played like a long set, 70 minutes. It was kind of a like an endurance test.
Yeah.
And she was just like viscerally upset by it. And one of my friends was like, "Are you all right?" And she's like, "No, this is like there's this music is evil." And he's like, "It's not evil. It's just for men, Women aren't supposed to like this shit." I
Well,
thought it was like, spot on.
one thing that was, I think, important about like Providence was that sort of music that we were making, or Lightning Bolt or Force Field or any of those bands, it was kind of considered like party music there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It wasn't like a very chin scratchy, like academic scene. I mean, I guess in some respects it would have been it would have been amazing if it was more diverse, but the population of the college wasn't even that diverse seeming.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And it really only appealed to a certain number of people. But I don't know, that was the thing that I felt like set it apart from other places. I mean, Detroit, like the Wolf Eyes guys, felt like their scene was kind of similar in the fact that they listened to all sorts of different music. They probably didn't think of themselves as like a noise band, sort of, neither do we. And it was about sort of having a good time. So um, it was it was an interesting moment there, I guess. You
Yeah.
really couldn't even get shows playing like weird music. I mean, there's some spots in New York that booked weird shows, Detroit, San Francisco, but then the rest of the country, it was usually you were playing with like hardcore bands or kind of garagey bands or things like that.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting that you guys were getting these like formal art educations at RISD, but at the same time, like Fort Thunder was this place where you could just be like completely unhinged and chaotic and like say fuck it and throw caution to the wind or something.
It was. I mean, looking back on it now, it seems kind of comical because it was an expensive ass school to go to. So there
Yeah.
was already like, I mean, a certain amount of privilege in just being able to go there. So it was, some of those kids who were at school were from incredibly wealthy families, but were still living like squatters,
Yeah.
basically dumpster diving and shit like that. But at the time, that was all sort of above my head. I didn't really, I don't know. Maybe I just wasn't that aware of anything.
Yeah. I just interviewed this girl who was one of I'm writing a true crime book about Hunter Biden. And
Oh, wow.
yeah, I interviewed one of his longer term, I don't know if she prefers the term, or let's say longer term paid for girlfriends.
Uh-huh.
And she was a RISD student, and she's like fabulously wealthy in her background. So
Yeah.
yeah, I got the sense that it's a pretty expensive school.
There's not a lot of financial aid. It certainly wasn't. I
They give
mean,
no scholarships there.
yeah, basically. It also
Yeah.
didn't even have like a really out gay population like when we were there.
At
That's
the time,
fascinating.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there certainly were kids who were queer and stuff like that, but it wasn't not a lot. Which I guess just before I started there, I assumed it would be kind of a lot of different types of people. I mean, and it was, but again, like maybe I just had blinders on and didn't pay attention.
But it's also a little more traditionalist in its approach to art at
Yeah, it's like
RISD. Yeah.
a very formal education, I would say.
Yeah.
But the thing that was cool about that is I felt like it taught you how to make things, but the most exciting stuff was happening outside of the school.
Yeah.
At places like Fort Thunder. I mean, that was really the only place, really. I mean, there was clubs there, but Fort Thunder was very different.
Yeah. My dad lives in Providence now. There's nothing going on there these days. I mean, there's still the record store, but you'll
Yeah.
see Brian
Is our
Chippendale walking his dog once in a while or something.
well, he's a lifer. Um,
Yeah.
no, I love Providence. I mean, I would if I could figure out a way to support myself, I would love to live back there. Um, but yeah, it was the right time, the right place at the right time.
Hmm.
Was Dominic at the same at school at the same time as you?
I don't think so. Um, but again, there's like my memory is fucking shit. So there's like some people that I've realized decades later I was in school with, but I just didn't know them.
Yeah.
But it seemed like there was sort of the first wave. I mean, there certainly was always bands in Providence like Six Finger Satellite and Dung Beetle and Hydrogen Tears and things like that. But then there was all the ones that sort of were more RISD associated, like when we were there. So like 94 or 5 to 98. And then it seemed like there was sort of a second wave of stuff like White Mice. Um, Still there?
I
Sorry, my
remember
phone's going to
them.
die. I'm going to have to go in and plug in a minute.
Yeah, that's
Um,
cool.
but yeah, but it was, I don't know what's been going on there since then. I mean, we played there on the last Black Dice tour. And it was fun. There was this band called I can't even remember their name. We played with some great bands while we were there. I just can't remember what they were called at the moment.
Yeah. I have a bunch of friends who graduated there kind of recently, but none of them are in music.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it still produces quite a few graduates who go on to do shit pretty
Hey, right?
immediately.
James Franco, the Talking
He
Heads,
James
Sam Hy
Franco
and Sam
was a
Hyde.
RISD. Yeah,
Uh,
there definitely are, and there's certainly a lot of famous artists that went there and stuff. But Talking Heads will always be
yeah,
the
the Talking
big
Head. Yeah.
the big name graduates, I
Jenny
guess. Although,
Holzer. Yeah.
oh yeah, yeah. I mean, it was a great place to grow up, I guess, for lack of
Man,
a
I fucking hate
better way
Jenny
of putting
Holzer's work so much.
it.
Protect me from what I want.
That shit is so low IQ.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's hard to look at things through today's lens sometimes.
Yeah, for
Um,
Yeah.
sure, for sure. Yeah,
but
yeah, the whole like 80s feminist stuff really it didn't age well.
I think anything that's slogan based runs the risk of like aging in a less than favorable light.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
but I don't know. I guess the opposite of that could be true too. Maybe. Sorry, there's a feral cat or some shit outside.
What part of LA are you in?
I just moved to Brentwood.
Oh,
Um,
nice.
so we are right up the street from LeBron James's house.
Oh,
And
hell
Bret
yeah.
Easton Ellis.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So my girlfriend's family has bought a house here in the 70s, and we have an apartment underneath her grandmother's place. But I'd been in Angelino Heights, so like right next to Echo Park for the previous 9 years, 9.5 years, I guess. So it's a little bit different on this side, but I like it. It's certainly pretty. I can see the Getty Center here, and I can see
Mm.
Catalina from the porch that I'm sitting on.
Yeah.
And, so it's quality of life improvement for me.
Yeah. I was out there semi recently to stage a play that I wrote, but I'd like to get out. I've wanted to move to Venice Beach. Like I've had the vague idea of wanting to move to Venice Beach for a while, but my wife's so attached to New York, I don't know if it'll ever happen.
But New York is like a being in an abusive relationship.
Yeah.
Fucking
I mean,
A.
I love it to death, but it can be so rough there.
I
But
yeah.
it's I'm always like, I fucking hate it. I'm so ready to leave, and then I'm like, but I love it, and everybody there is so great, and everything is like right at your fingertips in New York, and
Yeah, it's like the
it's
idea of like making new friends and shit again sounds kind of like brutal, but um I kind of have like somewhat of a reprieve because we live out in Forest Hills in Queens, which is like a bourgeois uh like suburban neighborhood almost. It's where
Yeah,
like
the
Wilhelm
Ramones
Reich.
are from.
Yeah, Ramones are
Oh,
from here.
he actually
Wilhelm Reich designed the orgone accumulator machine like 2 blocks down the street.
he lived really close to where I grew up in Maine.
No
They still
shit.
have the Wilhelm Reich Museum is in Rangeley. Um, so I've actually never been to the museum. I always space out on it, but um, recently just started rereading this book, The Book of Dreams, that his son wrote.
Yeah.
Kind of about his accounts of growing up with him as a father and having cloudbusters, busting machines in his front yard and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But Forest Hills is great.
Well,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I think you probably hit it right, Bjorn, with like being in New York when there was actually a scene when you were younger, and now that you're making visual art, like it seems natural to go
Well,
to
we have a
California.
scene. It's just like an ideal it's more of like an ideological scene
Well,
than like
it's
a
yeah,
it
it's
has
just
an artistic aspect, but so much of the shit produced is fucking garbage, and there are so many posers.
well that, but also I'm just thinking about the nothing is like has to do with regionality as much as it
Yeah,
did
yeah, yeah,
before,
yeah,
like
yeah.
you know,
That's
Yeah.
pro
true.
everything's online culture, so it's pretty interesting how in
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
I
it's
think you
true.
definitely realize that, like, having been playing music for like 27 years, like regional scenes are a little bit harder to come by.
Mm.
Um, which I don't know, I think it's kind of a shame in some ways, but I guess I'm also not someone who's young enough that I was really capitalizing on social media or finding out about music through the internet. You know, I would go to Other Music or Kim's and knew everyone who worked there, and or Rocks in Your Head, or those. It was, I miss having like a curator. You know what I mean? Like someone who knew what you liked and was like, "Oh, you should actually
Yeah,
check this out." And,
Mm.
yeah. Now it's
I'm
just
sure.
like now it's just like endless like gay edgelord Instagram accounts of kids being like, I got my fucking Grey Wolves t-shirt on. Check out my new EP on Bandcamp, and it's just
or it's like
all
or it's like
monoliths of
the
nonsense.
algorithm recommending you things.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's, I mean, I guess I found some stuff I like through YouTube algorithms and things like that, but you did feel like a certain amount of some degree of pride just for having been enough of a detective to find out about a lot of shit.
Yeah.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
but I don't know whether that was useful
Well, I'm
or not.
35, so I'm probably the last to have experienced that at all. Like I used to go
Yeah.
to fucking Newbury Comics
Oh
on
yeah.
Cape Cod and Hyannis, and the guys
I
there
didn't.
would set me straight.
Yeah, I didn't know they had one out there. It was weird because there was one that opened up in Portland, Maine, at some point. Um, hold on, I'm gonna go plug in here. But yeah, it was a very. I missed that. I used to go to Boston all the time just to buy records. Um, there and Mystery Train and
Twisted
uh,
Village.
Twisted Village, and what were some of the other ones? Yeah, it was such a great city for buying records,
Yeah.
even though I wasn't really getting recommendations from them. Or like Princeton Records. You okay? As far as I can remember, where you could just read the descriptions and probably score something. Is this too echoey in here?
Nah, you're good.
Audio wise, is this gonna be too echoey for you guys?
I think we're fine, yeah.
I think we're good.
As long as we get
Hello?
something. Might be cutting.
Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Yeah.
Can you hear us?
You guys
Hello.
can hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
I can hear.
Yeah, you can hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, I can barely hear you now. All right, I'll go back to earphones when I can. When I got
All right.
enough juice.
Yeah.
All right. So when the group starts transitioning in sound, first it comes from like a noise punk, and then it becomes a bit more harsh electronics, but then we land on Beaches and Canyons, which sort of like uh totally remakes the band in a lot of ways. But
Yeah, I would say so.
and obviously the record changed your guys' careers quite a bit. It got a lot of attention. But
Yes.
how did you guys go from how did that evolution happen?
Mhm.
Did you just decide one day you're like, hey, what would it sound like if we, you know, the title Beaches and Canyons has always been sort of like resonant with me because it's sort of like beauty and decay, you know, at the same time.
Yeah.
And that's kind of like what I hear the record as.
It was, well, basically when Aaron moved, he moved in with us when he went to New York, moved from Los Angeles to New York, and ended up crashing on our couch in this warehouse we had. And so we would just fuck around and jam, I guess, when we were all just hanging out. And so that kind of set the tone for making that kind of stuff. And then I went away one summer and did this residency program called Skowhegan that's in Maine, and wrote a good amount of like the guitar parts and stuff. And I guess just writing stuff in a kind of bucolic setting as opposed to in the city
Mm.
changed it a little bit. So that was sort of how it just happened. It did, it was because I was making stuff up that was maybe a little bit more aligned with what I was listening to. Then everybody else made their parts for it. But yeah, it was a departure in some ways, but it felt pretty gradual to us.
Yeah, it's interesting now to look back on that era because it's getting to it's getting close to the mid 2000s when like quote unquote noise had its semi mainstream moment. And like I just ran into Carlos Cafoni when I was in Osaka, who did the No Fun festivals, which sort of capped off that whole moment. But it was
Yeah.
clear, like, even though you guys had a tangential association with that world, that you guys were doing something completely different by that point. Uh,
Yeah, I mean it kind of, yeah, we did not have like a whole lot in common with a lot of those bands. I mean, we didn't ever view ourselves as like a power electronics band or a
Definitely not. Yeah.
noise band or anything like that. It just was, um, I mean, we listened to a ton of different types of music, but I felt like by the time like No Fun started, um, there were kids who were just into that brand. It almost started to become like hardcore in a way where it seemed like there was like a
Like a
brand and
genre
there was some,
codification.
yeah, and there was almost like rules to it. And a lot of the rules just sort of seemed like it was taking its, it was taking cues from Wolf Eyes, um, who I guess I can't, you know, say enough good things about. I mean, they're like amazing band, amazing people, super creative.
Yeah, especially
Um,
back then. Like I saw them like 2007, 2008 when they would really fucking tear the house down.
yeah, no, those were amazing shows. And grateful that we got to. I mean, we became fast friends with them. First time we met them, we played in John Olson's basement until I guess the way his wife was just like, "This is fucking you have to shut them off." So, but yeah, it really grateful that we've been friends with them for so long and have gotten to play. We got to play a lot of amazing shows with them through all their phases. Um, but I felt like they definitely had a lot more involvement with the sort of No Fun Fest world, and Carlos and Dominic and all those guys.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, do you feel like I mean it was do you feel like at the time it was still possible to even like it because at the time, you know, Pitchfork was becoming a big website and they were still covering it seems like now they only cover like black female R&B singers.
Yeah,
But but
I haven't
now
looked at it
but
for fucking ever. I mean, the fact that
I check in on once in a while just for, to feel myself getting closer to the bullet. But But back then they were covering like everything and giving a lot of bands a lot of awareness. So like, I mean, I remember in college and like people in the dorms like knew what Black Dice was. It was a really weird moment where like Outra stuff was getting outsized attention in comparison with other eras.
Yeah, it was sort of a strange moment. I mean, I guess, you realize the media has like a insatiable need for content. Um, and so they just, I don't know, they started covering stuff that probably never would have gotten any attention. I remember like there was a review of one of our records, and I can't remember if it was Spin or AP. It was something like that. And it was basically like a diss, the whole review. And then they capped it off by saying that we were like probably the only noise band to get laid with any regularity. So even like I felt like even in the mainstream media, it was still like we were still kind of a head scratcher for them.
Yeah, that's
Um,
pretty cool.
yeah, it was I don't even know if it was true at the time, but maybe compared to, we weren't like at the time weren't like middle-aged bearded guys wearing all black.
Yeah.
Um,
And
and
it's not
I,
like now where there's like a small coterie of like hot topic goth chicks that hang out
yeah,
at noise shows looking to fuck like
yeah, no,
guys
it
who make
wasn't.
20K a year.
Yeah, no, it wasn't like that. I mean, I feel like we were probably a band for at least like 2 years before we even made $100
Oh
at a
man,
show.
yeah.
And like, in big cities, it was sort of like at least, you know, boys and girls or men and women both at the shows. But um, it did seem like in general, the noise world, I guess for lack of a better term, seemed pretty bro heavy. Um,
Definitely.
so that was another thing that just made it seem, I don't know, like something we didn't want to be members of, I guess.
Yeah.
And I don't mean that as in like a diss to any of those, you know, to anybody. Just for us, it was, we listened to tons of like 60s music and reggae and lots of pop music. Um, and so those were more our points of reference. It just was always really a broken version of that stuff.
Yeah, you can hear it in the textures of the music, and there's always like a feel good vibe to Black Dice records. It doesn't feel like it's like relentlessly bleak. And I'm not saying I dislike I like plenty of relentlessly bleak stuff when it's done well, but
Yeah, totally.
Black Dice has like a up feeling to it. And what was I just gonna say? Fuck, I
I
just
think a
lost my
lot of
train
it
of
was like
thought.
wanting to make music that made you feel like you were on drugs. And that sounded good when you were on drugs. And for me, I guess I didn't want to listen to like I don't know. I mean, I love the fact that stuff like Merzbow, Masana, and
Yeah,
Incapacitants and all these bands exist, but it
yeah,
wasn't stuff that had a place in my like normal rotation of stuff I would listen
interesting.
to.
Yeah,
Um,
I just saw Masana. I just saw him play.
oh God, I've never gotten to see him, but our bandmate Aaron cites seeing him as like one of the most pivotal shows in his life. He saw him out here, and he was like, he just showed up wearing like he looked like fucking Jimi Hendrix. He had this huge stack of speakers and just like a change purse with like a contact mic in it.
Yeah,
It was
dude.
just like,
Yeah. Dude, it
um,
was nuts. So, Dominic and I have become friends over the years. So he got me backstage passes for the thing in Osaka, and Masana was the headliner the final night. And the second day, he had a decoy in the crowd the whole day. Someone who was like dressed like him with the sunglasses and the long stringy hair and the skinny leather jacket. And everybody kept pointing at him, being like, oh shit, there's Masana. And then finally,
that's
when I
amazing.
see Masana setting up, I realize that it's the old, feminine, possibly homosexual Japanese man that I met the night previously. So I'm watching him sound check, and he sound checks for like 45 minutes. Finally, the show goes on, and it was just 4 minutes total of the loudest searing assault with him thrashing about on the stage. It was absolutely especially after the 70-minute genocide organ set, which was so punishing. Masana felt like a cathartic party release or something.
No, that sounds amazing. I've only heard like the best reports of his live shows. But again, that to me, that seemed what was interesting to me about Masana when I found out about him was it seemed like a very rock and roll gesture,
Yeah,
um, as opposed to like an academic one. And I guess
totally.
that's always appealed to me more than I don't know. I mean, I remember, you know, it was a drag when your records were only like in the hardcore section at the record store, but it was better than being in the experimental section of the record store. Um,
Yeah.
so then once, it was for us, that was like a victory when those records were like not in those like tiny sections that only like a select few, leaf through.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
but yeah, that sounds like a, well, no, is he from Osaka?
Yeah, Masana's from Osaka.
Yeah, I would love to have been able to see him. I'd love to go back to Japan. We haven't been there for fucking 20 over 20 years, I bet.
Oh man, it was
Um,
amazing. I just, Matthew and I were talking about it on the last episode. My wife and I went to Tokyo, Osaka, Kyoto, and Nara. Takes a couple
the,
days getting used to it when you landed Tokyo because it's so much, but
yeah,
dude,
yeah,
I
it's
bought
it.
so much shit. We had to buy 3 extra suitcases just to pack in all the luxury goods, thrifts, and records and shit that we bought.
Yeah, no, I remember stocking up on shit the first time we went there. The first time we went to Japan was with Lightning Bolt, and we played, I think, Tokyo, Osaka, Nagoya, and Kyoto, um, and just bought tons of records and clothing. Like for me being a skinny dude, like clothes there fit better at the time and stuff.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it was a pretty amazing place, and there was amazing record stores. Like this one place, Los Apsons, that was in Tokyo. I don't know if it's still around, but it was like
Yeah, yeah.
just
I just went
noises.
there.
That place was amazing.
Yeah, it fucking rules.
Yeah, we were there, and actually, one of the guys, I don't even know how you pronounce this name. You know that band, La Ralices de Nu or de
Les Réalises de Nures.
Yes, like one of the guys from that was in the store buying a bootleg box set of his own
Holy
band.
shit.
And at the time, I probably did not know who they were. It wasn't until like that record or some of those records and the Taj Mahal Travelers records got reissued, which maybe was more like 2002 or something. That
Man, I love that band.
yeah, they're both of those bands are amazing and were just sort of eye openers. Um,
Yeah, I think they're one of the three, along with the Velvets and the Dead, as being like the best bootleg bands because there's so many like live, like random versions. They don't have many tracks. They only have like a handful of songs, but there's like 1,000 versions of each of their songs fucking played.
yeah, I've actually got into listening to some of the live bootlegs of them during the pandemic. I mean, and also I started listening to a lot of the Velvet bootlegs as well, um, which is, I don't know, it's always amazing to listen to that stuff, how
Oh,
they can stretch it out and how
100%.
it's a little different every night. And, but yeah, that was I don't know, I'm a little jealous. Sounds like you had a good trip.
Oh man, it
Bjorn,
was amazing. Much needed.
Yes.
on just on the note of performance and sort of variation, I'm just curious about, when you guys would perform these songs, like obviously you're not writing out sheet music or anything like that, but um and today's electronic music, obviously you had samplers back then, but most people who make it usually just like kind of hit the button on Ableton and let it run. But
Yeah.
how would that work when you guys would have to perform?
Well, it was always like every song was like we had practiced it. It was always like the same sequence of sounds and events,
Hmm.
but we didn't really start using samplers until I don't know, maybe like 2007 or something like that. Eric and Aaron both used like old mini disc players, and you can make loops on those.
Hmm.
But like we always had like pretty broken gear, so I mean, a lot of times like the little display screen on those. I don't know if you remember what those things look like. They're tiny. They're like the size of a pack of cards.
Yeah.
And the screen on them was like super tiny, and a lot of times that didn't even work. So my brother would just have to count, like as he was scrolling, like count
Yeah.
how many times to push the button. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people were under the misconception that we were improvising everything, and
Mm.
the only parts that were really ever improvised were mostly just like transitions between the songs.
Sections. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, but for the most part, like it was always like the same parts in the same sequence. And sometimes, if something was sounding good, maybe we'd let it ride a lot longer
Yeah.
than it appeared on the record. But yeah, to us, they always were just sort of songs that I don't know. We didn't fancy ourselves as like kind of a jammy band or anything like that.
Yeah, totally. Totally. Um,
But
but I'm sure it was a whole different experientially, performing live and the record. I'm sure there's that live component that maybe transforms it while you're there or something.
well, and also it was just always really, really fucking loud. So
Mm,
even
yeah.
like parts of songs that maybe seemed mellow on the recordings were usually pretty brutal. Like I think we really enjoyed having there be like a physical component to the
Yeah,
live shows.
sensory. Then and that also ties in with your guys' videos, like the over stimulation.
Yes.
Who handled were you the one handling those videos or
No, actually, our friend Danny Perez made all of our like projections for the last. I'm trying to think when he started. He was like our roadie and my brother's best friend, and then
mm,
started doing. He was at film school, I guess, around the same time Aaron was.
Yeah,
yeah.
he
Maybe
made
they
that
were.
movie Anti-Birth.
Yeah, so he made that, and then he made this movie for Animal Collective called Odd Sack, um,
Oh wow.
and both of those, yeah, those were sort of like more, those were films, but yeah, he just would make tons of content, and even the way he made the projections and mixed them live was like pretty archaic by most people's standards. It was like two little like truck stop DVD players, with like the tiny monitors on them.
Mm,
So he would just make like a shit ton of like DVDs of all these little clips, and then had a video mixer that had like a key function on it, so it could. But everything that a lot of times people assumed it was sequenced, or it was like we were playing to a click track. I mean, you'd have to be an idiot to think we were playing to a click track because
yeah.
it's not. It doesn't really stay the same tempo ever.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I mean, that was like that was like a really amazing thing to have at our disposal. He put a ton of work into it, and
Yeah.
is like one of our best friends, a pleasure to be around.
W-
Um, and also
Was
at the time, there weren't a whole lot of like smaller bands that had projections. I mean, it seems like every small venue now, like everybody you go to, and they're set up with a projector and a screen
mm,
and stuff like that. But at the time, it was, we would have to bring all that shit ourselves. Um, but that it certainly,
yeah, it seemed like quite the setup you guys would bring to the gig.
yeah, I mean, it's a ridiculous amount of equipment. I mean, my back hurts thinking about
Yeah.
it at this point, um, especially because you never knew when you were going to be playing on like the fourth floor of some place, or um, something like that. I mean, I always assumed I would have gotten like ripped from lugging gear for so many years, but that never happened.
No, it's more like breaks it back.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. So, but yeah, the videos were a big part of it. And Danny lives out here, so luckily, um,
Would you be
he
overseeing those in some way or giving some input, or you kind of just gave it up to him?
just gave it up to him. I mean, I think he was far more familiar with the tunes than I was,
Yeah.
and certainly knew what the aesthetic of the band was as far as like the record covers and posters and t-shirts and stuff. So I felt like he just sort of developed his own sort of take on that.
It's
Um,
it's incredible. I mean, people are like still trying to replicate this sort of style now.
Well, yeah, that's what I was always curious if you guys felt jilted by the fact when David Keenan wrote the hypnagogic pop article, and you guys weren't mentioned as an influence on that shit.
I don't even know about that article.
Oh my god.
It's
It's one of those Wire articles where they just be making up new names for for shit. But hypnagogic pop. David Keenan was talking about
it's like 100 gex and shit like that, or
this is way before 100 gex. 100 gex, fuck those guys. They talk shit to me online and they stole my music video concept.
oh shit,
Yeah. Sorry if
no
you're
bueno.
yeah, no. Did I
I don't
tell
know
you know
that.
about that, Matthew, right?
Well, I know the stealing, but I don't know the shit talking.
Yeah. My band made a music video. I have a band that's like a performance art project that's part bodybuilding, part performance art, part rock and roll. And then
Oh,
they
dude.
made this video of like bodybuilders that's like a direct ripoff of what we did a year ago. But
Oh.
because they know how to command like Zoomers on the internet, they fucking dwarfed us in traffic. So I have a
I
chip
mean,
on my shoulder.
I can relate to some. I mean, I think over the years, there's certainly times where I had a chip on my shoulder about stuff. Um, in retrospect, most of it was foolish to have a. I mean, I just remember like it was really hard for me to go see Animal Collective when they got super huge because they were like our
Mm.
little brothers and felt like our popularity was sort of dwindling and stuff. And um, but it was the dumbest thing. It's like they write really fucking catchy songs and they can sing
Yeah,
really
yeah.
well and they're fantastic at what they do and they were interested in making things that we weren't. And so when I think back to that time period and listen to our records, I'm just like, no wonder. I mean, this is like we were not doing the same thing and like all that success they deserved it.
Man, I
And
love hearing
do
that
deserve
though. That's so like that's such an honest thing to admit because yeah, I'm like that too. You want to be happy for your friends, but you just never are.
Well, I don't. I
I
mean, actually, one of them called me out. Like Brian called me out on that years ago. He's like, "What about like the 10 years you never would come see us?" And I was just like, you know what? Like my ego was all fucked up, and I was fucking just too loaded all the time, and feeling sorry for myself. And I ended up fucking missing out on all this like great times, and missed out being able to celebrate like the success with people I really love.
Mm.
yeah.
Um, and but it took me a while to get there. I mean,
Yeah.
but we were
I'm
always
trying
like
to work
super
through it.
competitive.
Yeah.
Yeah, it takes a minute, but you'll get there.
Yeah. Well, I have this thing where I feel like a lot of people read my books or my content or whatever and they take what they will from it and they come at me as friends, but then they end up doing what I feel is like a neutered version of what I do. And then they get the institutional approval that will always elude me because of the things that I say. So that's like the chip on my shoulder.
I think
But
ultimately that shit ages better though. I
yeah,
feel like
yeah, yeah,
the stuff
yeah.
that's done and
You're playing
done
the
sort of,
long game. Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, I would say the stuff that's
For
done
when you
without
die
compromise.
and then the prices go up on your your collectible art.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, NFT,
I
the
think it all
subsects.
balances out in the end, but it is weird when you feel like things that you did provided a lot of nourishment for other people, and then they've garnered a lot more success than you have. I at the end of the day, I always have like with a clear head. If I look at it, I'm just like, yeah, but they were able to do something that we weren't willing to do or unable to do, and that's okay. It's like all you can do is like, I mean, all I care about is like having fun with Eric and Aaron,
Mm.
and making stuff that we think is great. But it did take a couple of years of like sort of the band being on the back burner, before I kind of realized that like some of our friends were able to buy houses and shit like that, but I still feel like I'm the one who lucked out. I like best friends with like two people I've been playing with for over half my life. Um, so for me,
That's real.
that's worth more. Um, it'd be nice to have a house, I guess, but we never made anything. I don't feel like we ever were very generous with audiences. I mean, we're generous as far as like consistently making music and putting on shows that we thought were done the best that we could, but certainly never, I don't know, put like beats on things so that people could dance with it to it necessarily, um or adding like, I don't know, or when people wanted us to basically make other, just like a second version of Beaches and Canyons, at that point we didn't have any interest in doing it.
Mm.
You know, I mean, we're just like, yeah, we already figured out how to make that work, and why would we do it again? um
Was that a consideration though when you guys create, is the audience, or it, because it seems mostly like, yeah, just your guys' ideas and that's it.
I don't think we ever really thought too much about how an audience would receive it. I think that
Yeah.
we enjoyed having like a, I guess I can't really speak for them, but I certainly enjoyed having like a certain amount of power in a live show where you could make people feel sick, or, you know, if someone was heckling you, you could drown them out so you couldn't hear what they were saying, or, and then we had strobe videos so that I couldn't even see. I mean, that shit was like in our eyes, so I couldn't even see an audience most of the time.
Mm.
Um, I think that we had maybe like a slightly more mischievous, or I don't want to say mean spirited, but we like fucking with people in a way that some of our other friends bands, that wasn't their mo.
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
um and luckily there's room for all of it, but yeah, I don't think we ever really thought about like how someone might like something, or if we just tweak the music in this way or that way, like maybe would reach a bigger audience. That
Mm.
just didn't, I don't know. And maybe that's like some real Gen X, like leftover Gen X kind of thinking, where it's like you can't admit that you want to be successful, and there's like this stigma that if you are successful, that it came about through some sort of compromise of values.
Yeah, yeah.
um and you know, that's like a pretty young guy way of looking at shit.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
always about for the cause, being the purest ideological uh
Yeah, I mean, for us that was sort of more important, I guess, was that like they would be records that would hopefully keep finding listeners throughout the years. But I don't know. I mean, I think it's sort of strange. Like, I don't know if you've noticed this. I feel like music festivals in general, it's like by the time bands get to, even like an indie band, by the time they're like getting to play like big festivals, they all start to sound the same. It's sort of like the same kind of production and the same
mm,
sorts of like, it all becomes sort of like slightly danceable pop music, and which is, you know, I like some of that shit too, but I would much rather just know that what we made was like representative, like Eric and Aaron and myself, and where
mm,
our ideas were. And um you know, I mean, to be honest, like I don't even recognize most of our music. Like if I hear it on like a college radio or someone's playing it somewhere, I usually do not recognize it. um I usually like it, but I don't recognize it as us
mm.
immediately. And I don't remember how to, I don't remember making most of our recordings. I don't remember what I did on any of them, um, which is weird because they were songs that we practiced and played, and I obviously had a hand in writing them. But yeah, it just seemed like it was more important to just get on to the next idea
Mm.
rather than like, I don't know, put your energy into making a brand or something.
Yeah. How, so coming out of the music and where you are now, how have those things, like, maybe, they've obviously dovetailed, like you make the album covers and stuff like that. I know at one point you made a book, right? The
Yeah,
Gore
we made a
book.
book when we went to, with our friend Jason Rothenberg.
Mm.
We went to Australia for a tour. It was kind of like a package tour called, I think it was called like What is Music?
Yeah.
But it was like us and the Dead Sea and Gang Gang Dance and Growing and Richard Bishop and Sun and The Residents, Chicks on Speed. Um, and we just did like a couple shows in each city, and then we stayed and made an album in Australia, and that was called Broken Year Record. And so we basically just made this collage book, like kind of working on it while we were down there and using the imagery that our friend shot while we were down there. And so I think that that's always been like a big part of the band, was like trying to make artwork that helped contextualize what we were doing sonically.
Yeah, but I just, maybe from you, like, what do you think this sort of the ethos, or because I feel like a lot of the band and the visuals are sort of about um like the machination of like how you make it, but what do you think some of these things like mean on a grander scale? Or like, yeah, so like the book, for instance, because some of it is somewhat like random. Like, I'm curious about like the criteria of what you choose to use to make like the imagery, or is it just all based on feeling of what you into it, of what sounds good or looks good?
Yeah, I would say in general, it's more driven by that, just sort of
Hmm.
like it's maybe a little bit more impulsive. Again, I mean, I think at times like it had a lot more, at least from my point of view, to do with drugs and what might make someone feel like they're on drugs,
Hmm.
Yeah, let's
or
talk
might
about that.
enhance that. The the I mean, it's funny because I can't really do drugs anymore, but but at the time it was, I didn't have shit to do except for go to studio and go to practice. Um, so it was easy to kind of be, I don't know, out of it all the time. And since that's like how we wrote the stuff and how I made and all the visual art, it all seemed like it was part of the same kind of recipe, I guess. Um, I mean, I still like the idea of things being like sort of sensory overload and making things that don't necessarily fit into a box, but like maybe can make you feel a certain way as something that does fit in a box. I don't know if that makes sense.
But I'm just curious. Like, what do you think that way is that someone might feel? Because
I mean, I think,
you definitely put a lot on the audience member to sort of make up its meaning.
yeah, I mean, I think we were making like, have always made like pretty abstract, or I guess deconstructed sounding music, but trying to present it in a way that was like a rock and roll band. But I like the fact that you can get people to feel the same way that like a heavy metal song or a ambient song or a tech, you can get people to feel those same way as they would listening to that stuff, but you can break it beforehand, or can distill it down to just like one or two sounds that maybe make that's reminiscent of something that they already have experienced listening to.
Hmm.
But I like the fact that like you didn't have to be playing like straight ahead conventional music in order to make people feel euphoric or overwhelmed or
Hmm.
ecstatic or scared. Um, all those, I guess that was the thing, is like all those sorts of things are kind of heightened depending on what you ingest. And it just sort of seemed like you could use the music as in the same way that someone would use the substance, I
Hmm.
guess.
I recall you mentioning that you were using a lot of salvia at a certain point.
Yeah, yeah, we did. Which is funny because it's such a non-fun time drug.
Yeah, it's like the
It's like,
scariest drug ever.
yeah, for some reason we just got into it, and would just roll it up in spliffs. Um, but I don't think I could handle something like that anymore. I think it would, I, I don't know. I think psychedelics are one of those things that can be valuable as far as like changing the way you look at things, or at least exposing you to the fact that there is another way of looking at things. Um, but at a certain point, I don't.
You get so the effect wears off, right?
It does, and also I just don't. Shit happens in your life that maybe it's stuff you don't want to revisit, and
Yeah, the
you don't have
trauma
a whole lot of
recall
control.
becomes worse and worse.
Yeah, so that was, I mean, for me, that was like a big part of why I feel like I can't fuck around with certain stuff anymore. And
Pretty much every psychedelic has been 50-50 for me. Um, I had some
yeah,
good times and I had some. The first time I ever took shrooms, I ended up getting fucking screamed at by my friend Greg Iadonisi's Italian contractor father who knew we were high as kites. He was taking like just like his like little tough Italian face, just reaming me out. What the fuck is wrong with you guys? You want fucking drugs or something? So that was a bad introduction to the world of
yeah,
psychedelics. But
yeah. No,
no,
it
we
can
all
be.
gotta chill at a certain point.
It's a crapshoot. I mean, again, I'm very grateful for all the experiences I've had, and grateful that I survived everything. But I think I think also like there was some part of me that felt like if you were fucked up, it validated making really weird sounding music too.
Hmm.
Um, I don't know if I think that anymore so much, but at the time it just sort of seemed like this get out of jail free card as far as having to justify what you were doing. Um, which I guess maybe, I think there was some truth to it, um, but it also becomes, it's like anything. Things can become traps at a certain point. Um, and also, I mean, I remember going on a tour with supporting Animal Collective when they had like kind of their first, or I guess second big record, this record, Merriweather Post Pavilion, and like it was a really straight audience for the most part. Um, it was like frat dudes and shit showing up, and a lot of kids going to it and taking acid and shit for the first time. And it was kind of fucking terrifying. I mean, like ambulances were having to come to the gigs regularly, and just kids having like meltdowns
Wow.
because they had no idea what to expect. And I don't know. The older I get, I don't want that responsibility. I don't want to feel like that was responsible for that happening. Um,
Yeah. Well,
you know,
and the drugs are different now, right?
yeah, I feel badly for kids now that you can't. I don't know. I mean, friends of mine who are like, "Well, it's cool. I got an ethical dealer." I'm like, "You really think everybody that was involved in getting that fucking shit from South America or whatever was ethical every step
I
of the
mean,
way?"
no such
Um,
thing as an ethical dealer.
yeah, I mean, like, it's one thing if it's your friend grows mushrooms or grows weed or makes hash or something like that, but or you have chemist friends who can make stuff, but in general, I don't know. I don't trust. I don't trust anybody at this point. Um,
No.
Nor do I recover from shit the same way I used to. So,
Yep.
but yeah, I mean, we started off as a pretty drunk band, and then we're pretty much perma-fried for a lot of. Or I guess I should just speak for myself on that front.
But
Because
so you guys are still making music till this day?
yeah,
You had a
yeah, I think
record a
we're
few years ago.
yeah, we had that record, which took forever to make, just because for part of it, Eric was living in Spain, and Aaron and
Yeah.
I. At one point, Aaron moved out here, so both of us are here. Eric is now back in New York, but he was in Spain for probably like 6 or 7 years, maybe
Wow.
8 years. So it just took forever to get like, I don't know. We used to practice almost every single day. And before practice, Eric would have been in the practice space for 5 or 6 hours by himself. And then I would go
Oh
in
my
for a few
God.
hours by myself and go home, get dinner, and then just go back to the space.
That sounds great in today's world of like constant distraction by cell phone.
Yeah, it was actually pretty nice. I mean, our practices were they ran the full spectrum of how productive we were, I guess. I mean, a lot of times it would just be like
Like a
jam,
hang.
he just like smoking tons of weed and drinking beers and listening to mixtapes that we were bringing in. But
So
but
it's all part of the process.
it was certainly all part of the process.
Yeah.
So, but
But
yeah,
so
it was.
you guys have had to work like remotely now or
Yeah, I mean, we've never really. I guess the last album, maybe there was like a couple things that we tracked and then sent things to Eric, and then he would make a part and track that. But we've always been we've never been a band that really recorded ourselves. We always, from the very first 7-inch, would go to a studio with somebody and just do it all live. So there was very little like assembling of like, you know,
No, that's
like
what's up.
Frankensteining stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's so that ethos like is so lost today, and especially if you guys are doing it live. I mean, everything's like DAW, MIDI instruments or synthesizers and stuff like that.
yeah.
Uh,
And for us, I mean, it was mostly, I think most of the time when anytime someone thought that there was a synthesizer on something we were using, it was always just mixer feedback
mm,
through different pedals, or just like loops and things like that. I mean, I just remember the Animal Collective guys were like kind of ahead of the curve, as far like more ahead of the curve than we were, because they were using a lot of like pre-recorded things, either just sort of like texture or ambient stuff, and we had to sort of stick up our ass about like that felt like cheating or something.
yeah, yeah.
It certainly wasn't, and obviously we kind of followed suit. But it was,
For the time, I mean, you guys committed to a convention or an aesthetic,
yeah, and we just,
and worked in the confines of that.
yeah, and I think that we also always just, um, I don't know, we just evolved at the rate that seemed right for us. I mean, we probably talk shit the whole time, but at the end of the day, like it was just, I felt like
Yeah,
we were just making what we enjoyed doing, and or
totally.
enjoyed listening to, or would want to see if we, made, we tried to make shows that were ones that we would want to go see and experience.
Mm.
Um, and kind of worked out.
So tell me about your process now, because you went to school for sculpture,
Yeah,
and
I was
and
gonna
that's
say
what
we should cover your tandem career as a visual artist while we have you.
I know.
Yeah.
I know a little bit about your processes, or you had described in the past of like working with an object that was maybe, I don't know what the word would be, disheveled or something, and then sort of building off of that. Like I've seen some of your sculpture like involving vinyl, like repurposed vinyl.
Yeah.
Uh, um, what is the process like about, well, just making the piece, but I'm also, again, like I asked about the criteria is like, what makes you decide to like work with a certain material or object?
Mm, well, I guess I like working with like found objects or things that I found that like no longer have a value to them
Mm, yeah,
because
yeah.
it's broken, or it was something that was like with those billboards, I guess, the like reclaimed vinyl things. I guess what I liked was that it was like a permanent, it's a permanent object, even though the value of the billboard is only really pretty short lived. It's really only worth something for the time that the advertisement is running.
Yeah, and it's
Um,
interesting too, not to cut you off, but just about conceptually that the value of the advertisement is just the space, and to print it is a different question. Like the cost of printing and the vinyl material itself is like a whole other that cost.
yeah, I mean, I guess I don't really think about like my visual art practice as being that different from the band one. It's sort of like you find like tiny nuggets of something that's interesting to you, and then you expand on that. I
Hmm.
remember we did it was like a moderated dual discussion with us and Genesis Peorage, and
The late.
yes, RIP. But they were talking about how like making collages or assemblage based artwork or cut ups or music that involved those sorts of practices was just like this, technically in their mind, was like a form of alchemy, where you were taking something that had like a negative value in some respects, and then through some sort of intervention are coming out the other end with something that has a value, whether it's just conceptually or whether, you know I guess literally too, with artwork. At least, I mean, you could be making something out of a pile of shit, but if you can sell it, all of a sudden the value is has changed. But that always seemed like something that stuck with me was the way they were able to articulate that, because I think it was essentially the way we thought about it, or the way I thought about making things, but had never verbalized it as concisely as they did. But then, you have your others, like all your sensibilities sort of factor into it, like where you're from and how you grew up and the things you used to have, your memories of things that you had growing up, or just like your sense of, I feel like a lot of times I'll just find things just based off of color or something like that. But usually when I'm making like visual, like if I'm making like a bunch of collages or something like that, I usually start by just cutting out every single thing about it that I don't like. And then you're a lot of times left with just this like kind of weird janky skeleton, but that's enough of a framework to build off of. And that's pretty much in keeping with how we make music too. Like you might find, I guess the easiest, the first time I sort of thought about this was like, getting into a lot of like older dub and really liking the super animated parts about it, but not really giving too much of a shit about just like the drum and bass, like stripped down drum and bass thing. But you realize like, oh, you could just sort of build something off of the part that you do like. And that's sort of how a lot of our songs came about, I would say. Or, I don't want to play garage rock, but I really like a hook. So maybe you can just make up some sort of a hook and repeat it ad nauseum, and that'll be enough of a skeleton first. And the nice thing about playing with Eric and Aaron is like nothing, and Hisham and Sebastian, when they were in the bands respectively, was that nothing ever turned out the way that I would have imagined it. Like, I might bring in a seed for an idea, and I would, assuming they would say the same thing, that if they brought something in that they had sort of like fucked around with on their own, it never turned out exactly the same as they would have envisioned. And I don't really enjoy making like visual stuff that I could I'm not interested in like coming up with an idea, making a sketch of it, and then executing it so that it comes out that way. To me, that's like uninteresting for me. I'm not saying that that's an uninteresting way of working, but for me, I don't really like that. I like being surprised. I like working off of mistakes. I like things that have like a real fingerprint on them, whether that's visual or audio. But I think those are the things that give things character. There's the mistakes, and again, I sort of feel like a mistake isn't a mistake if you do it 2 times in a row. So like sometimes at a show, like if you fucked up, if you just did it 3 or 4 times in a row afterwards, just repeated the fuck up, nobody knew. It was sort
people might be banging their head to that fuck up.
Yeah, and as long as you're just unapologetic about it. I think that was another thing that was a big influence. Were bands that were unapologetic.
I saw Wu-Tang Clan in Worcester, Massachusetts in like 2004.
Say it right. Say Worcester the right way. Don't say it like that.
What?
You got a Mass accent in there somewhere.
Worcester.
All right, thank you. That's what I was
in Worcester. You know how long it took me to get rid of that fucking accent? And like they took like they were like 2.5 hours past stage time, and then by the time they showed up, they were all completely fucked up. But they were all there, save for ODB, who had recently passed. And they started with Incarcerated Scarfaces from Cuban Links. And Raekwon was so fucking shit-faced that he, like, it's the most memorable course ever. Like I know it off the top of my head. It's like, yo, what up, yo? Tom is running out. He was like, yeah, Tom, like, and he had his hype man just like doing the whole the whole chorus and verse for him. But it was fucking sick. It added to the concert.
Well, I think that's that basically what you're describing basically sounds like all that footage of the Germs, where you're just like, I know there's lyrics in there, and maybe he's enunciating in the right like pattern or whatever, but when you can't even get it together to get the fucking words out.
Yeah, it's nuts because Darby's words were like very weirdly deep too. Like he was fairly intelligent and well read, but the recording it just sounds it's
It
nuts.
was funny. My girlfriend's a nurse, and I was talking with her about this one show in Providence that we didn't play, but it was force field landed, drop dead, and then men's recovery project. And during it, like landed started, and the band started playing, and the singer Dan came out completely on fire, like had lit his upper body on fire and covered himself in rubbing alcohol or some shit like that, and didn't stop playing. Like they just eventually it just burned off his body, the shirt, and he's rolling around in all this broken glass and stuff. And from like an adult nurse's perspective, she's like, that's fucking ridiculous. That's so stupid. Why the fuck would you do that? All you're doing is like fucking, there's people at the hospital who need to be there. And then you're going there to fucking, you know, and it was funny because I was like, yeah, I
Yeah.
guess I can't. I was like, that's the second. I know two people that have done that at performances, but
Yeah.
you know, and I was like, obviously I can't justify it in the same way that I would have when I was younger. But the one thing is you did not feel like you felt convinced that they meant business
Yeah.
in that situation. Like if you were willing to like risk your health or whatever for the sake of this performance, then I'm at least convinced it was a sincere gesture.
Yeah.
But it is funny to like think about that stuff now. I mean, that was like one of the best shows I've ever seen in my life. I mean, his fucking lip fell off like a couple days later.
Jesus.
It grew back, but you know, just like just shit like that. Which, but I guess that always was important to me, was like going to see stuff where you felt 100% convinced that they meant business. They were so committed to the idea that it didn't matter what happened. It was more important to just get it across.
Yeah. I mean,
I don't know
I
if,
guess there's a version of that with what I do now. Like I've stuffed myself full of dangerous hormonal compounds that can't be good for my health in the long run, but the project only
you got to
makes
get yourself a
sense.
nurse, homie.
Yeah, I need a nurse.
Hey, my girlfriend's a nurse too, so
No
Oh,
shit.
nice,
yeah.
My
nice.
wife's a publicist.
Oh, dude. Well, that's
um,
good too.
yeah, yeah, it's stressful for all of us, for all of our sakes. You're still represented by two galleries, right? You got Jack Hanley and Cooper Cole.
Cooper Cole, I'm still working with. Jack and I parted ways a couple of years ago. I felt like when I moved out to Los Angeles, I sort of there's a lot of big life changes sort of going on. And um, I don't know, it just stopped being the right fit for me. So I do need to find like new galleries to work with and stuff. But in the meantime, I've just been trying to fall back in love with making stuff,
Hmm.
which is going well, I will say. But
Yeah,
and
it
then
ain't
Aaron
easy
and I
out there
also,
for a white man in the art world.
well, I can't comment on that obviously, but the,
I still had to try to get you to
no,
though.
I will say I am certainly thrilled that people who have been underrepresented are getting their shine and stuff. I think maybe it can be a little bit problematic if the only way that people are curating is just based on identity. Um, I remember getting into it with, I work at a bunch of galleries. I remember kind of getting into a slightly heated discussion with a female coworker, um, where she's like, you just like that because it's a guy. And I was like, I actually don't give a shit about who makes something. Like I grew up before you could Google somebody. So
Hmm.
like really all you had to make your decisions was the content. You know,
Yeah.
it's like
Yeah,
you saw an image and you either responded to it or you didn't respond to it, or you heard a record and you either liked it or you didn't like it. You didn't know shit about their political beliefs unless it was crass or something like that. Um, but I also just think it's sort of foolish to think that like good art is made by good people exclusively, because most of the time I don't find that to be the case.
Yeah, definitely not.
Are
But
You
we good
rotten
people?
bastard. No,
yeah, you guys seem like good people.
I have a sweet side, but I'm definitely a rotten fucking contemptuous bastard at the same time.
Look,
Yeah, I have that
I
streak too.
like Drake, but I don't think he's a good person.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
interview was fire the other day. Did you
I
watch
Um,
don't
that?
understand.
Oh, it's a Kanye West interview that he sold on his website the guy's so valuable at this point he can sell his own interviews for $20 on his website, and both of us bought it.
Oh,
why I watched the bootleg. Yeah.
that sounds amazing.
Um,
Yeah, he's definitely on another
Well, I'm
level
sure
when it comes to
Kanye's taken
marketing.
some relief that Diddy has taken over his place in the tabloid media
yeah.
Yeah,
for the time
dude.
being.
Diddy is a fucking I mean, but that's it's one of Kanye's things is he was kind of like sending out warning signals about Diddy's proclivities for like years. And that was
Yeah,
part of people being like, no, he's just crazy. That motherfucker crazy. But it turns out not. I mean, but like the rumors about Diddy as like a boogeyman of rape have been like documented for years, I feel like.
yeah. I mean, I feel badly for people that are dragged into that I don't know. I mean, I'm just grateful that as a band we existed pre cell phone and pre
It's true.
we would have been canceled from the get go. I mean, the early shows were so violent, and not because the audience was violent, just because we would just clock people or
Mm.
throw. My brother would just do all sorts of fucking shit that there's no way you would get away with nowadays. And it's not like I'm, as a older person, I'm not bragging about it or anything like that, but like, we wanted it to feel like a bomb was going off
Mm.
when
Yeah, and
we
that's what it
played.
felt like.
Yeah, thank you. That was basically was the what we were looking for. And but when that happens, sometimes shit, people would get hurt. And um I mean, even from our first show, like our first show, like someone died at, and
Oh my God.
Fuck.
that was the first show I ever played. But yeah, like it was right after we played, and um I think Landon was playing, and two kids fell out of a third-story window like 2 inches away from me, and unfortunately one of them passed away and the other was in a coma for a long time. And
Jesus
um
Christ.
so there was like a pretty dark, I don't
Hey, it's
it was
excess. Excess gets dark sometimes.
yeah, I think that's maybe the way to
It's the solar anus is what Bataille would call it.
well, it's funny because like after that, when I look back on like when the ghost ship fire stuff happened, I mean, part of what made like Providence and playing like those sorts of warehouse spaces fun was that it felt like things were like teetering on the edge of a catastrophe.
Hmm.
Um, but then I guess it only takes like one mishap and that something really tragic can happen. Um,
Yeah.
but there was something that just seemed interesting about being on the edge of that happening. I guess in retrospect, sometimes you realize like maybe you were contributing a little more than you should have to that happening. Um, but again, you were just young and wasted, and
Yeah,
um,
man. No regrets. I
no
long
regret.
for that. I long for that that kind of you wouldn't believe what it's like these fucking days. Last week I had some fucking schizo alcoholic crackhead like waging a YouTube campaign against me with accusations that I was this guy has like 100 Instagram followers. There's like he's not important enough for there to be a conspiracy against him, but he was claiming that I and was conspiring with Gagosian Gallery, who obviously has nothing to do with me and wouldn't spit on me if I was on fire, and the CIA to ruin his life, and then added it with a bunch of like sex pest accusations. And of course, that's never fun to hear your name alongside that kind of thing. And
No,
at
you
first,
definitely
it's
don't want
like,
that.
And the worst part about that shit is like I just blocked the motherfucker. I'm like, whatever, this guy's crazy. But then all your friends message you, hey, I just saw this. Are you okay? I'm like, yeah, I was okay until you fucking sent it to me. Like, the guy's clearly crazy. Don't send me this shit. I'm fine.
Wait, Bjorn, show us the rat again.
Oh, he took off. My girlfriend is
Ah,
a rat enthusiast. That was Pluto. Um,
nice. Didn't you
sorry.
just say Pluto's anus, or did you say cosmic anus, Adam?
Oh, solar anus.
A solar anus.
It's
Solar anus.
Bataille's term for ritual and catharsis. He believes that like any chaotic outbursts like riots or religious fervor is a fundamental part of human being called the solar anus, where we have to expel all our violent tension, so to speak.
Hmm.
I mean, I certainly was fascinated by stuff that probably would have fallen into that category. I mean, I think that was something that was amazing about seeing like early boredom stuff or
Oh yeah.
early. I mean, I guess a lot of like bands that I saw that were real high energy was just there's something that did feel kind of cathartic about it, and something entertaining about being a little bit afraid, like
Yeah.
that you were gonna get you could get hurt, or I don't know. I guess I missed that. At this point, there's not a whole lot of stuff about like live music or art that feels very mysterious to me. You know, it's hard to go to a show now and not realize like these assholes showed up like 6 hours ago. They loaded all their gear in the same way. They sound checked. They went and they fucking sat in the backstage for a little. You know what I mean? It's not. It
Yeah.
doesn't feel like a mystery anymore.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And not that that's a bad thing, but I, I feel like I never got to see the Butthole Surfers like in their heyday. We were fortunate enough to be able to play a handful of shows with them. Um, but everyone I know that saw them like in the 80s and stuff was just like it was total head fuck.
I mean,
Like
they
it
were
was
so good.
terrifying. Yeah, I mean it was and you had no doubt they meant what they were doing. I
Yeah.
mean they're like basically homeless for big chunks of it. And, but yeah, I think it's tough. And I think right nowadays there's so much sort of policing that goes on. Um, that I don't know if I don't know if I'm a fan of that,
Yeah,
to be
definitely in
honest.
the States. I mean, so many bands can't even get gigs here like altogether,
Yeah.
for whatever and whatever reason. But I think there's pockets of spaces opening up. I mean, there's no doubt I run my fucking mouth. I'm headlining a gig. I'm headlining a gig in Austin, Texas, of all places, co-headlining with Rat Bastard from To Live and
Oh,
Shave in
nice.
LA. So that'll be cool.
Well,
But
that's tapping into a slightly older set of heads too, who
yeah, I think that's what they're trying to do, is this sort of like old head new thing, see if it works. But I'm not sure how it'll go, because I know there's probably going to be some people in Austin who hate my guts, but what are you going to do?
you can't apologize. That's the main thing. I was
I
watching that
never do.
footage of Grimes having her
Oh
Coachella
yeah, and having the
meltdown,
malfunctions.
and
Yeah.
my bandmate Aaron was just sort of like, he's like, you fuck, just don't say a fucking thing. Just ride it out. Like it'll be fucking fine as long as you don't like make a face or anything like that. No one's gonna know,
Hmm.
Yeah.
or they're gonna think that you did it intentionally and just own it. But
That's
that's
jazz right
easier.
there.
The what?
I said that's jazz when you start playing the wrong notes.
Exactly. Exactly. But I remember
But
Yeah.
apologizing once at a
Grimes
show.
is Albert Eiler.
Yeah. I mean, I think she came from kind of like a noisy background.
Sort of, yeah.
Uh,
Or
I mean, I think
like the captured track sort of vibe, maybe.
that's that.
Um,
Who's the guy that is that Mike? I can't remember. Who's the guy from Blank Dogs that did captured tracks or does captured tracks?
I remember that band. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think he did do captured tracks.
Yeah, he's a cool. He's a cool dude. He used to, is that Record Store Co-op 86 or 87 still around?
I don't think so. Um, I don't think it survived the pandemic. The only record stores that are around now are the academies. There's still that like extreme music one in Brook Bushwick,
Ah,
Material World.
that
Uh,
might be after my time. I sold all my records basically to that guy. Um, like well, just so that I could constantly stay faded. Sold like my entire record collection bit by bit, and it was always either at Academy or at
Hmm.
Co-op. They were
yeah, my
generous.
wife would love if I did that.
Yeah.
They take up so much fucking room.
Well, I was grateful when I have like 3 milk crates of records now. I mean, I finally have all of the Black Dice records. I don't have all of my brother's records. Most.
Just to finish
It's
up, do you have a favorite
I'm
Black
grateful
Dice
when I had to
record?
move that I didn't have a ton of them. Hello?
Hey, can you hear us?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
God damn it.
The internet.
You guys can hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Hello?
Hello.
Yo.
Hello.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Sorry about that. I just
No, it's
was
all
too
good. I think we're almost ready to finish up anyways. I was just curious to end if there was one Black Dice record you look back on particularly fondly.
I really like Repo a lot.
Yeah, Repo's sick. Load Blown and
Thank you.
Repo are both my favorites.
I like both of those. Repo was just sort of at a point where we were very prolific. Um, and it was a fun record to make. Same with Load Blown. I mean, actually, Mod Prog Sick, the last one, is also one of my
Yeah.
favorite ones. But yeah, those ones were kind of like my favorite one, and it was always nice. Like who I think with Repo, like I remember seeing a review that his name, who's the guy that owns Curation, Alan McGee.
Yeah.
Um, he wrote like a really amazing review about it, and that felt like a real victory because I was a big fan of that label growing up. The fact that he saw some value in it along the throughout the years, there's been moments where like someone we really respected came out and said they were a fan, and that always meant a lot to me. Like Lou Reed wrote like a little blurb in Rolling Stone once, and that was a
Wow.
Yeah, that's
huge
amazing.
win. Because they certainly didn't have shit to do with the scene that we came out of and stuff. But I remember telling him that we basically made it the same way that Metal Machine music was made. It was mostly just like feedback that was being processed. Um, so, but yeah, those were some fun ones to make.
And just before we're done, it has been rumored through a YouTube comment that I saw that when you guys released Cone Toaster, that Timbaland, the producer, was like really into it. Can you confirm this rumor?
We were told that that he was a big fan, or that he apparently was just like those motherfuckers are crazy.
Yeah, he said that's the quote, that's some freaky shit.
Yeah, and we were. That was
I didn't know that.
apparently that did happen. There's been some other weird brushes, like when we were recording Creature Comforts. We started recording it at DFA, then they did a one day we came in, we had all this time booked, like we were allowed to make records on like a budget, like on a big budget,
Hmm.
foolishly for them, but they threw us out one day and they're like, you guys can't come back, we're working with Britney Spears. And so Britney Spears came in. We didn't get to meet her, but there was this rumor that her record was called Black Dice Wolf Eyes that was coming out. Which they probably had our records there. Whether that was true or not, I don't know.
That would have been so fucking cool.
It would have been good.
I mean, Timbaland's a king, dude.
Yeah.
Look, I'm just saying, I've been listening to you guys recently. I'm like, there might be some samples here to be had.
Yeah.
Thank you. I would basically.
I might have to make a beat.
Do it.
Get that clearance money.
No, it's crazy. I do feel like one day maybe people will start sampling some bits of our records, but
wow, we're digging in the crates for these.
Yeah. I mean, you just throw beats
it's funny
behind
because
it.
I've been listening to so much of that 90s R&B stuff, like the Brandy Boy Is Mine album and Genuine and Aaliyah and shit. And Genuine's sound, it's the same, like that same like pitter patter drum on every fucking track. He just did fucking everything. There's that story Kanye told about him doing one of the tracks on his third album where he was trying to figure it out before it got released as a single. And he had like 6 producers come in, play with it. And then he had Timbaland come in and he did it in 5 minutes. And then at the end of it, he said, you see that? You see that? That's why I make the millions or something like that.
Yeah, that was for Stronger.
I mean, I feel like all that Jay Dilla stuff is still high water marks just because it's so off in the right way.
Shout out to Jay Dilla.
That's right.
Jay Dilla.
That's right.
Bjorn, this was fantastic. Thank you so much for your time and coming on the show. We appreciate it.
Thank you. I hope the video part wasn't I know it went black for a while, so hope that's not a problem.
Surrealism.
All right. Well, no, it's been a real pleasure and very flattered.
Yeah, nice meeting you, man.
Yeah, likewise. You guys enjoy the rest of your night.
Yeah, I'll send you the episode when it's ready to go.
Terrific, man. Look forward to it. Good luck with the show in Austin.
All right. Thank you so much. Talk to you soon.
All right. Take care.
All right.